Good afternoon. Let's begin with that story that Boni Tunya has intimated, where members of the National Assembly are this afternoon expected to debate a report to degazette the Salaries and Remuneration Commission notice. Now, this is a notice which stipulates the amount of funds that public officers are meant to get. MPs have been engaged in an aggressive push to have their salaries reviewed upwards, and members of the civil society have not taken this well, with various protests and petitions filed on the same. This, as a section of media reports that the SRC now says they are ready for dialogue. The SRM team has been adamant that the public wage bill is too high to meet the MPs' demands, but has now allegedly changed tune, saying MPs should not be isolated for demanding better terms. Well, our senior reporter Aaron Ocheng now joins us from Parliament, where he is following the details of this story. Aaron Ocheng, it's expected to be a very busy afternoon in Parliament this afternoon.
Yeah, right. It is the morning. We're expecting a heated debate here in Parliament. But as you rightly put it, I don't think that members of Parliament are going to disagree on this particular matter, since this is a matter that is touching on their salaries. As you know, they were supposed to be on recess like their other counterparts in the Senate are on recess, but they refused to go on recess because of this particular day that they are seeking to degazette a notice that was published by the Salaries and Remuneration Commission that slashed their salaries from right about 850,000 Kenya shillings to 530,000 Kenya shillings. Now, if they degazette, if they adopt that report that will be tabled in Parliament, and they degazette the Salaries and Remuneration notice, then it means that that notice will be null and void, and the Parliamentary Service Commission will be able to now to process their salaries using the previous rates that the 10th Parliament was using. So as you rightly put it, we're expecting this is going to be an easy sale for this particular debate, because it is something that is touching on their salaries, and this is something that we've seen previously that members of Parliament are always cooperative about. Edith.
All right, Aaron, now we are receiving reports from various sections of the media that the SRC have said they're open to dialogue. Is it a little too late? I mean, if the MPs decide to adopt this report, what happens?
Well, Salaries and Remuneration Commission has no choice, because this is a law-making body, as you know, Edith, and they can actually do anything. As the story that I did yesterday, I highlighted that Salaries and Remuneration Commission has its mandate, but Parliament has the overall say. So, as you've said, Salaries and Remuneration Commission are willing to sit on the table with members of Parliament. Probably they've realized that this is a tall order for them, and the Parliament will have its last say, come whatever may come.
Thank you very much, Aaron Ocheng. He is joining us from Parliament, where he's following those proceedings, and we'll be linked up with him later. At around 2 p.m. is when we expect all the action, if you like, to go down. Let me now hand you over to Boni Tunya, who has more information with regard to where former Vice President Kalonzo Musyoka is.
Right, many thanks, Edith Kimani. And indeed, former Vice President Kalonzo Musyoka has asked county governors to firmly take their positions in the devolution units, saying they should not feel subservient to the Cabinet Secretary on devolution. He said governors had been given their mandate by the people and thus remain superior in the devolution structure. He, however, reiterated that the working relation between the governors and the devolution secretary should be one that does not undermine either of the parties. Kalonzo was speaking when he paid a courtesy call to the Nairobi Governor, Dr. Evans Kidero.
On a more countrywide approach, we sincerely, as court, hope that Kenyans internalize the concept of devolution. You can imagine, this is not one man to be responsible, to be held under lock and key by a secretary, maybe the secretary in charge of devolution, for instance. I expect that there is going to be allowed, without let or hindrance, to change the city of Nairobi and the county of Nairobi. Therefore, everybody must, I think, in my view, find their level, so that the reality of devolution begins to sink. We do not expect that Governor Kidero is going to sit in judgment against anybody else, and similarly, nobody at the level of Cabinet Secretary should say you are subservient to the cabinet secretary.
You know, land is and remains a contentious issue in the country, especially if it involves women and inheritance.
Right, under the old constitution, women were not allowed to inherit land from their fathers. However, this meant that this might have changed with the new constitution, which ensures a woman is free from any kind of discrimination and has the right to inherit land.
But as Najma Ismail reports, one Kenyan woman's experience at the hands of her brothers proves that it is a different story on the ground.
35-year-old Joyce Reinhardt, a Kenyan living in Switzerland, is a bitter woman. Reason being, she has been denied her inheritance by relatives who ganged up against her in a land inheritance row. She says that a house she put up at her rural home in Nandi Central was demolished while she was abroad.
Wakati nilipoingia nyumbani nikaanza sasa kuhuzunika sana wakati niliona hapa imeharibika, kila kitu imekuwa mbaya, nikasikia uchungu sana kwa sababu yani shida niko naye uko ngambo, alafu nikuje nipate shida nyingine hapa hapa Kenya.
Joyce, who came back to the country early this year, was shocked to find that the brick house was destroyed and her relatives were planning to eject her from her ancestral home. She says that although she lives in Switzerland, she still has a right to own a home in Kenya. However, several members of her community differ.
Katika kimila yetu ya Wakalenjin, aswa sehemu hii ambayo tuko sahi ambayo ni Lolkeringet, ambayo ni Nandi, ni kwamba mambo ya kurithi mali ni ya wafulana, sio wasichana. Watu uchukulia wasichana kwamba ni watu ambaye wanastahili kuolewa na waache nyumbani na waende wajipatie mali zao mahali pengine mahali ambao wameolewa.
Hiyo inategemea. Hata kama nikisema inategemea na mtu individual. Nikisema mtoto wangu atakuja nyumbani, atakuja. Lakini saa hii sheria imesema hata msichana anapata share kwa nyumbani.
It is illegal to deny women the right to inherit from their father, and according to Chapter 60 of the new constitution, land in Kenya shall be held, used and managed in a manner that is equitable, efficient, productive and sustainable. Najma Ismail, KTN.
Elsewhere, Meru residents are blaming the rise of insecurity in their town on street children whose numbers, they say, have become unmanageable. Now, in the recent past, residents are being mugged not only at night, but also in broad daylight. Charity Kimani has that story.
They come from as far as Isiolo, Nanyuki and Embu, and they all have a story to tell as to why they chose this hard-knock life. They face challenges, spending countless days and nights on the streets with no place to call home. They marry amongst themselves and have children, forming what they call street families. But the residents of Meru want the government to intervene due to the rise of insecurity in the town. According to John Dongo, a businessman in the town, the children have over the years taken over the streets and terrorized the residents. So much that at night, walking alone is dangerous as many are robbed at knife point. Paul Etinga, a street child, says his parents were murdered by cattle rustlers, forcing him to flee to Meru. That move changed his life forever. With nowhere to go, and he became a street boy. He is appealing to the government and well-wishers to come to their rescue and assist the street children to get education, a move that he says will go a long way in transforming their lives. Charity Kimani, KTN.
Well, from matters of street children, let's now take you back to Parliament, where something unprecedented wound up yesterday. The second vetting of the cabinet nominee to the, or rather the secretary to the cabinet nominee, Francis Kimemia. And this afternoon, he will know his fate as the Parliamentary Committee on Administration and National Security is expected to table its recommendations on Kimemia's appointment before Parliament. The Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission, which presented the committee a dossier linking Kimemia to mega corruption, wants Parliament to reject his nomination. Rita Tinina is keeping an eye on the committee's report and now joins us from Parliament. Rita, I suppose the first question is, do we have any clue whatsoever what the committee's recommendation on Kimemia could be?
Well, Edith, we do not have the exact contents of that report, but our sources in the committee tell us that the committee will this afternoon give a favorable recommendation of Kimemia when it tables its report before Parliament. As you said earlier, the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission has expressed reservations on Kimemia's nomination as Secretary to the Cabinet. Yesterday morning, the Chief Executive of the EACC, Halake Dida, appeared before the Parliamentary Committee on Administration and National Security. He basically defended a letter that the Commission had written to the committee expressing concern or asking the committee not to endorse the nomination of Kimemia. Our sources tell us, although the Commission did not give the full details of its allegations to the press, our sources tell us that the Commission is alleging that Kimemia has been involved in mega corruption. We understand several cases are being investigated by the Commission. Among those cases, we are told, is the expansion of the Jomo Kenyatta International Airport and the Tokyo Embassy deal, as well as a case involving land for the settlement of IDPs. And so the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission does not want Kimemia's nomination to be endorsed. But yesterday, the Committee on Administration and National Security heard from Kimemia. Kimemia was given a chance to respond to the allegations by the EACC. Later, the committee retreated to make its recommendations, and those are the recommendations that will be presented before Parliament this afternoon. We are expecting that the report will be tabled and members will then debate that report, and we are waiting to see whether the full House will then endorse or reject Kimemia's nomination. Edith.
All right, Rita, it's a good thing you've just spoken about endorsing or rejecting. What happens if indeed they agree to endorse him? Does he lose credibility then, given all these things that have come up from the EACC?
Well, Francis Kimemia, of course, first of all, he is among the most senior civil servants in the country. If the committee proposes that the...
We seem to have lost Rita Tinina. She's following that report for us in Parliament, and we'll get back to her as soon as... Oh, I understand that we have her back on the line. Rita, I'm sorry we were interrupted briefly due to technical challenges, but you were saying that if the committee recommends his approval, what happens?
Then it will be up to the President, Edith, to formally appoint him. But of course, if the committee, and it's not just about the committee, remember the committee can make its recommendations, but when they are tabled before the House, MPs can amend it. Remember, in the case of Phyllis Kandie, during the vetting of cabinet secretaries, the committee on appointments had recommended that her nomination as cabinet secretary be rejected, but when the report was tabled before Parliament, there was an amendment that was moved, and Phyllis Kandie was accepted as a nominee and was later appointed by President Uhuru Kenyatta. So it is not just about the committee. The committee will table its report before the House. Members can amend or pass it as it is, but we are waiting to see what happens in the House this afternoon. Remember, I said our sources tell us that the committee has made a favorable recommendation on Kimemia, and it will be up to the full House to decide the fate of the nominee for Secretary to the Cabinet. Edith.
Thank you very much, Rita Tinina, our senior reporter, following the proceedings. Of course, the committee she's talking about is a Parliamentary Committee on Administration and National Security, which is looking into accusations of grand corruption by Francis Kimemia. Elsewhere, residents of Meru County have been urged to take their livestock for the ongoing vaccination program. The vaccination campaign is one against rabies, anthrax and lumpy skin disease, so as to avert outbreaks of the deadly diseases. Speaking during a vaccination exercise in Abothuguchi West, Area Livestock Officer Mr. Henry Kenywa noted that the area has experienced a bout of anthrax outbreak which led to the death of several cattle. He noted that all dogs and cats must be availed for vaccination as well to eradicate rabies, a disease that also affects humans if bitten by an infected dog. Farmers in Meru and North District have benefited from more than 100 goats donated to them by the Livestock Department under the World Bank Sustainable Land Management Project. As part of the program, the beneficiaries will have to give out the first kid to members of other groups. How nice is that? Well, the pilot project is being tried in Meru and North, and that's in Kuso, Narok and Dadaab districts. And the success of the 4 districts will then determine whether it will be rolled out into other parts of the country. The area livestock production officer, John Wanjie, while giving out the goats, said the goats are a new variety to the goats that can grow as much as 70 kilograms in 7 months, as compared to the local breed, which can only attain 40 kilograms after more than 3 to 4 years.
Katika hii mradi hawa walichagua uzalishaji wa nyama, meat coat production, na wakaonelea kwa mafunzo yao wangetaka meat goat improvement.
Right, from goats and dogs, let's talk about trees now. Adults will not be there to watch our world go dark. So it is up to us children to take this initiative and be the front runners for our own future. Well, that is a message from the UNEP Climate Change Ambassador, Felix Fink-Boehner, who is in the country to champion the climate change drive aimed at growing 1 trillion trees by the year 2020. Earlier, I had a chance to speak to Felix, the 14-year-old climate change ambassador, whose course was inspired by the late Nobel laureate Professor Wangari Maathai. Here is how it went. Felix, you're trying to plant 1 trillion trees by 2020. How did that come about?
This is because we have these big crises facing our future, the future of us children, and the only way to solve these, or the easiest way to do something against them, is by planting trees. And this is why we started this 6 years ago. And meanwhile, there are children all around the world in 193 countries planting, and of course, I'm very happy that so many children are planting here as well.
Why children?
It's because we children will have to live with all the problems which are not solved today. And many adults around the world are doing far too little.
We'll be dead by then.
To solve the problem. Exactly.
Right. Great. And you've been in Kenya. How different is the situation, climatically speaking, from what you've seen in Germany and across the world?
The problem here in Kenya is Kenya and many countries in Africa will probably suffer the most from the climate crisis because of the extreme increase in temperature there will be here, and there will be more droughts and so on. And another problem is that in Kenya there are very little trees. There used to be a lot, and Wangari Maathai helped replant many, but still I think there's only 2% of the country is covered in forest, and that has to rise extremely.
Right. 1 trillion trees, back to that, is quite a huge number compared to where we are and where we need to go. So how do you coordinate these efforts? How do you ensure that everyone is working together?
The main activities are coordinated through the internet, and there are children and youth all around the world participating, and they all tell us how much they have planted on the website. But it's not only children and youth, because last year the UN handed over the official tree counter of the world to us children, which means that all adults, companies, organizations, governments, everyone that plants trees helps this project.
So we're talking about 1 trillion. How far are we?
We already have 12.6 billion trees planted in the last year, so that definitely shows that these trees these are possible.
Right, question is at 14, where are you?
Not planting 1 trillion trees, I'll tell you that, but it's so impressive. 12.6 million trees, he said?
Billion
trees so far.
Yeah.
All right, well, you know what? I'll take him up on his offer and I'm going to plant a tree.
All right, you better do that. Now, moving on to other matters away from trees. Prison staff at the Shikusa farm prison were forced to spend the night in the cold after a storm destroyed their homes. Heavy winds ripped off the roofs of most of the houses, leaving the occupants exposed to hailstones that followed.
Well, the farms were not spared either, with crops uprooted in the raging storm. Senior Superintendent of Prisons, Japheth Onjiri, said staff members were now looking for alternative accommodation as they await repairs to be carried out. He appealed to well-wishers to come to the rescue of the affected families and help replace the destroyed items, adding that the loss was huge. Elsewhere, the National Police Service Commission has now come out to assert that despite efforts to derail the recruitment process, The commission was working to see that county commanders would be in office within 2 months.
Now this coming after reports that the Office of the Inspector General had advised officers against applying for the 94 available positions of County Commissioner on the grounds that the recruitment process had been suspended. The Commission also alleges that officers who have applied for the positions have come under threat. Over 300 officers are reported to have applied for the positions of County Commander.
There had been a concerted attempt to derail the interviewing and the vetting of police officers for the position of county commanders. However, we are pleased to inform the public that the Commission, as at this morning, has received more than 300 applications for the 94 advertised positions. The Commission shall proceed to shortlist, interview, vet, and appoint the successful officers to these positions as is the requirement of the law.
Right, and at that point we'll take a short commercial break. But remember, all the stories you've seen on this particular show, you can catch them on our website, that is
www.standardmedia.co.ke. And if you're like Tunya and can never seem to get it right, you can get on our Twitter page. That's at KTN Kenya or at KTN News Desk, where the website will also be linked. Stay tuned.
All right, and welcome to the program. It is time to have our afternoon business chat, and today we'll be talking about unit trust. I'm talking about the first stockbroker to be allowed to offer unit trust. I know that sounds like rocket science, but to help us understand is Muammar Ismaili, who's the head of research at Genghis Capital. Karibu sana.
Thank you.
Muammar, I think we should just start from the basics. What exactly is a unit trust for the Mamambogas watching us right now?
Basically, it's a collective investment scheme that takes contribution from numerous investors and pulls it together. And then what is done is that money is taken and invested in numerous asset classes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it's like a better word for a chama.
Yes, you could say that. It's another word for a chama.
All right.
Yes.
We've known Genghis to give us research, a lot of info, to be involved in stock brokering. Why this plunge into offering unit trust?
Well, it's an extension to already diversified portfolio of products that we offer.
Right.
We also feel that it targets a particular segment of the market that has been neglected for some time now. For example, as you know, you only require 500 shillings in order to invest in the unit trust. The formalities involved are very simple. I mean, if you have any investable income, you can send it through M-Pesa. So it's an extension of our existing portfolio, and we believe it targets a segment of the market that really hasn't been targeted by any of the other stockbrokers that are there.
All right, very quickly, you've also offered us more than what we bargained for. You are talking about Sharia compliant unit trust. How does that work?
Basically, it's a fund. As you know, we have 5 funds. One of the funds is Sharia compliant, and it means it adheres to Islamic principles. Now, primarily, this means that we're not involved in investing in companies that do lending. That includes conventional banking. Also, we'll avoid investing in companies that are involved in haram activities. By the Islamic definition, that means illegal, yes. Or alcohol, gambling, dubious trade, so on and so forth. And then finally, it's an ethical investment. You'll find companies that are Sharia compliant don't have high levels of debt. So during times of economic downturn, they're very stable, they're more stable than their conventional peers.
All right. Yeah. Very quickly, as we take this home, Muammar, we've seen the economic survey. A lot is looking up. The government has set up a target of 6%. If we were to talk about personal finance from where you sit, what would be, this is a chance for free consulting, what would be the top of your mind areas of investment for an average Kenyan?
Well, I'll reiterate what a lot of analysts have been saying previously. We see increased asset allocations into equity, into the equity segment. Also looking a lot at the real estate sector. We think it's relatively stable. There's a lot of demand both locally and from foreign for both residential and commercial uses. So those would be the two main asset classes that would be focused on. But on the whole, the outlook is very positive. We forecasted a growth rate of roughly 6% in both 2013 and 2014. So fairly stable indicators and variables going forward. Yeah.
So there are lots of areas for Kenyans to put their money.
There are lots of areas right now.
Of course,
for
the unit trust is one of the places.
And the unit trust is one of, and it not just doesn't invest at one asset class. It invests in all those asset classes that I've mentioned.
All right.
Yes.
Muammar Ismaili, head of research at Genghis. Asante sana for coming to the show.
Thank you very
much. Thanks for shedding light on what exactly a unit trust is.
Thank you.
Right, and we'll move on to other matters now. Only a day after the Energy and Petroleum Cabinet Secretary Davis Chichir indicated that there will be an audit on the Kenya Power relations to connecting fees hike, the utility firm now says it has adopted a new model of costing. In notices appearing in a cross-section of Tuesday's dailies, the firm indicates it has abolished the standard 35,000 shillings it charged previously and now connects customers based on what it calls the economic cost of connection. Earlier in the month, Deputy President William Ruto put a freeze on any attempts by Kenya Power to increase either its connection fees or tariffs. Thus, Ruto noted that it will be a burden to Kenyans as he asked the firm to look at other revenue-raising capital. The Kenya Power, however, insists the previous charges are unattainable in the current operating environment. Right, that's just about all the business this afternoon. Over to Edith for some sport.
Right, and in the sport this afternoon we begin with tennis, where Rafael Nadal has been confirmed as the new manager of Napoli. The club referred to Benitez as a great man and a leader after announcing that the former Chelsea interim manager would replace Walter Mazzarri at the Stadio San Paolo. The Spaniard was pictured shaking hands with Napoli's president De Laurentiis on his Twitter account. The first job for Benitez, who was also linked with managerial vacancies and Real Madrid, will be attempting to keep hold of the Uruguayan forward Edison Cavani, who is expected to move away from Italy this summer. There's a picture from Twitter we were talking about. Now, Benitez quickly emerged as a favorite to replace Mazzarri, who resigned from the Serie A runners-up a week ago and was appointed as Internationales coach on Friday. The 53-year-old led Chelsea to Europa League victory and third place in the Premier League after replacing Roberto Di Matteo in November. He won the European Cup while at Liverpool in 2005 and the FA Cup in 2006, both on penalties. This year's Europa League win was his second in the competition after he won it with Valencia in 2004.